Welcome everybody to this webinar on sending large files securely without leaving Outlook. This is a presentation about our Shift for Outlook product and why we came about making the decision to build this solution for the age-old issue of sending files which are too big for email. I want to thank you for your time today, for taking the time to allow us to share with you, and I look forward to hearing some feedback from you as we go through. So please feel free to ask me any questions as you go through. My colleague Murray is on the line as well, who will let me know if anyone raises their hand or puts any sort of comments in the chat. As far as our agenda goes today, apart from a very warm welcome, I thought it would be useful just to give you a quick context about who we are as Liverton Security and why we think we may have a solution for large file transfer. I'd like to give you an overview of Shift and what that means. And then I'd like to give you a live demo. And of course, a live demo is really the heart of what we're going to do today. And it's the best way of seeing how something operates, is to see it actually operating. We'll then look at some deployment considerations, how you would get the Shift to be deployed in your own environment, and then talking about some licensing and the investment. And my hope is, when you look at the licensing and the price for Shift, you'll think it's well worth the investment. And as I said, anytime, please do ask your questions, either in the chat or raise your hand. Firstly, a little bit about Liverton Security. We have a byline here in Liverton, which is we want to help people stay cyber safe. And we've been doing that for over 25 years. We are 100% owned by Murray and I here in New Zealand, so we're owned and operated here in New Zealand. Our head office is in Wellington, and all of the development we do, and this includes Shift and the other products which I'll talk about in a moment, have all been built by us, by our in-house development team here in Wellington. Just looking quickly at a couple of those other products. We run the government DNS, so anything ending in a .gov.nz, .mil.nz, .health, .parliament or .school.nz, we run on behalf of lead agency, and we've been doing that for a few years now. We also provide a secure email solution for government agencies. We currently look after about 70% of central government agencies. Now that's going through a bit of a transition, but right now, as of today, we process around about 30 million emails per month go through our mail protection, our mail gateway, SmartGate. And all of the infrastructure we use to provide those services is based here in New Zealand. So we have a rack space in the Spark data centers in Wellington and in Auckland, and we have our own equipment in them, our own files, our own file servers, our own firewalls, and so on. So it's all our own equipment. And while we do use public cloud services, we think it's important to have those technologies here in country. So that's why we have them in Auckland and Wellington. And as we've been working through the various solutions we're providing for our customers, we have had a number of conversations with our customers about how to securely send large files. And that's what got us to build Shift for Outlook. Email is no longer a practical mechanism for transferring files of any size, really, due to the size constraints and also the security implications. So what I'd like to do is just touch a little bit more on as an overview of Shift. Shift is actually an anagram. It's for secure, high integrity file transfer. And we've got us running directly within Outlook. You'll be aware of some of the other solutions out there like Dropbox and WeTransfer, which are very much web-based solutions. There's also some inherent insecurities with those products, which we believe we've resolved with Shift. Now, for example, you don't know where on the internet a file has been stored. It could be anywhere. You don't know who else has access to those files. I'm quite certain that from a WeTransfer perspective, the Chinese government are probably looking at every single file which is transferred. And some of those systems are quite complex as to set up. If you set up a OneDrive share, that can be quite complex and quite often misconfigured, or files are left in place long after they should be put in place. What we wanted to do with Shift for Outlook is have a mechanism where you can send a file, a bit like sending an email, where it gets delivered to the recipient, and then after a period of time, it automatically gets removed. And you know exactly where it is, you know exactly who has access to it, and you have total control over the files you're sending. As I said, it sits within Outlook, although we do have a web version, which I'll touch on as well. It uses single sign-on, so you don't have to remember credentials. It uses your Microsoft credentials, the same one you use for Outlook. It's elegant and easy to use, and I'll demonstrate that for you in a moment. And it really has practically, you can use it for files of any size. I mean, we're talking, for the laws of physics, probably anything over 100 or so gigabyte. It's going to be impractical to send across the wire. However, the system would support a file of up to 500 gigs if you really, really wanted to send that. There's a certainty of delivery. We have a receive notification. You'll be familiar with email read receipts, where it's up to the recipient to decide whether or not the sender gets to know whether they've read the email. In Shift, we've turned that around. If you send a file to someone, you will get a positive confirmation that they've retrieved the file through the retrieve notification. And again, I'll show you that in a moment. There's no possibility of file retention. The maximum time a file can stay on the Shift infrastructure is 30 days. The default is 7. And if you're really concerned about a file not lingering, you can have a one-time retrieval. So when the recipient retrieves the file, it gets immediately removed from the system. And as I mentioned, for those who don't have Outlook, or if you're sending files to somebody and you don't know whether they have Outlook or not, we have basically exactly the same thing. It's called Shift for Web, and it sits in a browser and looks pretty much the same. Again, I'll demonstrate that to you momentarily. In fact, why don't I do that now? Well, just before I dive into the demo, please iterate if you have any questions, do raise your hand or let me know, and I'm keen to answer any questions. This is my email, and so this is where the demo starts. So I use this on a day-to-day basis. So you will have seen I just removed an email which popped in. So as I'm doing this demo, because it's live, it's entirely possible I'll get an email come into my inbox. And you'll see that Shift is sitting in the ribbon at the top. And if I just press the Shift button, the first thing it does is it just authenticates in the background using my Microsoft credentials. So in a moment, you'll see that it will complete that authentication. And it comes in with what looks a little bit like an email template or an email window, which we wanted to mimic the idea of sending an email to somebody. And so this is where I can send a new file. Firstly, it tells me what my licensing is. It shows that this is who I'm going to be sending, is my email address, and I can enter here recipients of any type. So if I can, so what I'll do, well, before I go through that, I will then show you the other tabs, and then I'll send a file. We have an inbox. That's files that people have sent to me. As you can see here, and you'll see that mostly these have expired because they've been sitting here for longer than the period of time the person chose, which was typically 7 days. And you see also the files I've sent, and this is one that I sent earlier today, just to double check that everything was working as expected. And we have a request tab. The idea here is that you can send a file to anybody who has an email address, and they can receive it and send a file back to you without needing any sort of license. So that's what we call Shift Public User. If you want someone to send you a file, but you don't want to bother sending them a file to give them permission, you just send them a request. So you put the email address in, send your message in, send request, and they'll get an invitation to send you a file. But under normal circumstances, when you send a file to somebody, they can send anything back to you as part of your license. So let me go through it. So I'm going to put in my Gmail email address. I'm going to choose a file I've got here. I'll just drop it on. So I'm just using the user guide. I'll drop onto there. You can, of course, click on the button and it will navigate as you would normally expect. I can put in a message. Oops, can't even spell. And then I've got some additional information I can do as well. I can say one-time retrieve, which means that when it gets delivered and the person retrieves it, it gets removed from the system. Or under normal circumstances, it's 7-day retention and a maximum up to 30 days. So I'm just basically going to send that file. And you'll see it's probably going to be a relatively quick automation because it wasn't a terribly large file. You will have hopefully seen that animation go on. So that file has now been sent. So to show you the other side of this, I'm now going to log into my Gmail account. So opening up Chrome. Of course, it's gone onto my other screen. So I'm going to log into Gmail. These are the first two things I was testing earlier. You'll see here that I've received an email, which is saying that this person, Richard.Bourne@LivertonSecurity.com, has sent me a file with a message which I sent, and there's the file name there. Now, because I'm working on the basis that as the recipient, as my Gmail, I don't have Outlook, and so I can then use Shift the Web by clicking on the button to get that. And so it's going to invite me to log in. So I can see here that it's auto pre-populated my email address. If I go next, it will then send me a code back to my Gmail. Which I can then enter into login, and I can log in. And you see it does that authentication again, not using a Microsoft account because I don't have one, because it's Gmail. And you'll see here that if I go to new, it shows me my license is public. But so there's the file I've sent, and it's the user guide. So basically, if I just click on the user guide, it will retrieve it because this one's sitting in a browser. It retrieves it as normal. Comes onto the screen, and if I open it up, you'll see this is the Shift the Web user manual. So that's me sending a file outside the organization. Now, if I want to return a file, I can go back to, well, actually, before I do that, what I'll do is I'll go back to my sender. So this is me as me as the sender. You'll see here that I've got the email template, and it's showing me that richardjbourne@gmail.com has retrieved the file. So I have positive confirmation that this was retrieved. And we find this quite interesting. We've used this quite a lot for formal documents we're sending to auditors and people like that. And it's great to get an acknowledgement back from them that they have retrieved the file, so we know that they've got the file in their possession. If I go back to my Gmail side, I then go into new, I can then, you'll see there that shows you a little bit about the licensing and what that means. I'm just going to send back, and I cannot send to just anybody because my on the Gmail side, I only have a Shift Public license, so I can only send back to people who have sent me files. So if I was to send to for example, a Bob, it'll show me that I can't send it. I don't have anyone with that name in my contacts, but I can send to richard.bourne@livertonsecurity.com. And again, I can choose a file. I'll just use the same file again. Maybe I've updated it and I want to send it back and say, here are my updates. Okay. Again, I've got the same options available if I need to, and I can hit send, and it will send the file. So you see, it's basically going back in the other direction. Very similar interface to the Shift for Web, or sorry, for the Shift for Outlook. I'll go back to Shift for Outlook, and so if you'll see I'm sitting here just using Outlook as normally. I will then get an email pop up saying that someone has sent a file to me, and it's showing it's come from richardjbourne@gmail.com with the response. And you'll see if I look at the Shift, you'll see there's a little one coming up in the inbox showing that this is where the user guide is, and it tells me it's ready for retrieve, and I've got all the details I need, and it shows me when it will expire. And again, I can click on that link, it'll pop up where I want to save it. So I save it, it's fine, I can save it in there, and it will then save the file. One of the other things to just quickly show you is if I log out of the browser here for a moment, you'll see that one of the options within the Shift for Web feature is signing in with Microsoft. So if I sign in with my Liverton Microsoft account, it will do the same thing again. It will authenticate me with my Microsoft account, and it will show me exactly the same screen as I get within Outlook. So you see here, these are looking at the sent items. So this was the item I sent earlier just before. Hello, webinar people. And in my inbox, this is the one which I've just retrieved. So that means just to demonstrate that if you've got a Microsoft account, even if you're not using Outlook, you can still log into the Shift for Web interface with your Microsoft account. Okay, hopefully that makes sense as far as the demonstration goes. A couple of things I'd like to share with you as well is one of the key features of Shift for Outlook is the ability to make it look like it's coming from your organization. So when I'm showing an example here of the template we use for Kapiti Coast District Council, who use Shift for sending, they send LIM reports to their constituents via Shift. And it means that when the recipient gets the message or gets the notification, it has it's coming from Kapiti Coast District Council, and so it gives it a level of authenticity because it's showing that it's coming from that organisation. So whereas what I showed you previously, if I go back to it momentarily, you'll see this is branded with the Liverton branding. You'll see the Liverton logo here. That can be your own brand, your own logos, etc. From an architectural perspective, there are two parts to Shift. First one is a central authentication node. That's a high availability node sitting in Auckland and Wellington, where the Shift for Outlook connects to and ensures that the person is legitimately able to log in. But we have what we call file server nodes, which we have one in London, we have a couple here in New Zealand, one in Auckland, one in Wellington, and you could have a Shift file server node in your own environment if you like, and that would mean that any files which are sent to or from your organization could be managed and looked after by you, potentially in your own tenant or on your own hardware. So we can deploy that. So that's that whole idea of not quite knowing where the files are. If you've got your own file server node, you can have certainty of where the files will be, and you can have total control of them, even to a point where we don't have access to those files, so that only your own administrators will have access to them, if you wish. Looking at deployment, there are several ways you can get Shift. First one is through the Microsoft Marketplace. It has been certified as a Tier 3 solution. It's directly on the marketplace. We're working with lead agency at the moment to bring that up to a Tier 1 certified solution, which means it can be used for formally classified documents. If you purchase through the Microsoft Marketplace, then we would help you with the deployment process. If you alternatively, you can retrieve Shift directly from the app source, the Marketplace, or Microsoft. So if you search for Microsoft, so go into the Microsoft Marketplace and search for it, or indeed click on the link on our website, it'll take you to the Microsoft Marketplace, where it's set up as what's called a transactable download. In other words, you can purchase it through Microsoft, and that you can do that either as an organization or Shift Premium. And I'll go through the licensings, so that the different types of license in a moment. There's also an option for an individual deployment. So if you just wanted to download it, if you reach out to us, we can we can provide you a manifest file which you can sideload into Outlook. And of course, you can do all of that from Shift and Web. As I say, if you go to shift.livertonsecurity.com, you can log into that now and review it. If you would be a Shift public user, so you wouldn't be able to send any files to anybody, but you could at least have a look at how it works. Okay, now there are three types of licenses, and this is where I'm hoping you'll see that the pricing is, we think, is pretty cheap, really. The first one is the licensing for a Shift organization. Now, Shift organization is where you've got 50 or more users. You can send any files to anyone with an email address. You can do the personalized branding, which I showed you previously, and that includes what we call sender domain, where you can have the notification coming from your domain. So at the moment, you'll see that if I go back to the example here, this is coming from no reply at livertonsecurity.com, whereas you could actually have it coming from as to no reply at your organization. Again, just to give it a little more legitimacy on the messages you're sending to people. You can set up a dedicated Shift file server node if you wish, or you can use the existing ones. There's a ability for administrators to do an overview of the organisation usage, so they can see who's sending files to what and what sort of usage is going on. And the license count, this is an important one, is based on the unique users per month. So if you're let's say a 500 user organisation and you buy 100 licenses, and you know that only 100 people are likely to use Shift in any given month, if you bought a 100 user license, it just naturally counts up however many you're using, and will advise if you exceed that count of the 100 licenses. It means that you don't have to assign licenses to individuals in your organization. You don't have to remember to drop a license if someone was to leave or whatever it might be. It will just use the unique users per month and just keep that rolling. And if you need more than 50 users, then it's basically $2 a user per month for all of that. The Shift Premium is intended as sort of individual users who want to send, or small organizations who want to send files to anybody with an email address and just basic with the basic functionality of Shift. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's the Shift Public user, and that's somebody who where it's free for anyone to use. Users can only send files back to people who have sent them files or have received an invitation. And there's also a feature where you can forward files. That's something which is we're just going through final testing. We'll be releasing shortly, and that was a request which came from Kapiti Coast District Council. They send LIM reports to people, and sometimes those people want to forward the LIM reports onto somebody else. So we're making that change for them. So therefore, you can send a file to the recipient, and the recipient will be allowed to forward that on to a new contact. They won't be able to send an additional file or anything else, but they will at least be able to forward that file which is sent to them onto the next recipient. And the sender has control over whether or not that can occur. So that's how the licensing works. And that's really me coming to the end of my formal presentation. And I'm keen to hear whether anyone has any questions, whether I need to cover anything in more detail.